we have Mauricio, I call him Mau, Velazco. He is a fellow Latino here in the United States and now works at Splunk, but used to work at a large, semi-large, pretty large financial. So met him there, probably met on Twitter actually, or maybe DerbyCon. I don't know where it was, but we talked quite a bit. We're into this purple team stuff. Remember last year you had a purple team tool that got accepted to Black Hat Arsenal, and I was presenting C2 Matrix, and we kind of did dry runs with each other just to make sure that we didn't make fools of ourselves out there, and we succeeded. We did a great job, and just very happy to have you here and have you back on our stage talking some more purple team stuff. Miles is going to talk about Active Directory and purple team playbooks, but he also has a lot of experience building tools, doing lots of purple team exercises at large organizations, contributing to open source, of course, contributing to the community. Of course, like all our speakers here, we're very excited to have you. Of course, we're going to be on your hallway saying "Vamos Mauricio," like Dennis just said. And yeah, let's take it away.
Cool. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk, Active Directory Purple Team Playbooks. Thanks, Jorge. Good to see you again, at least virtually. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about Active Directory Purple Team Playbooks. This topic is I'm really passionate about this topic, but this topic is pretty broad, right? So, and we only have 30 minutes. So we're only going to cover a couple of use cases, but I hope this will be useful for some of you. As part of this talk, I'm also going to be releasing a new project in its initial beta version. And it's a project where I'm going to gather and document a library of purple team playbooks that can, for Active Directory, that can be easily, used by people who want to execute their own purple team exercises, okay? So we'll start real quick with a quick introduction of myself. As Jorge mentioned, my name is Mauricio Velazco. I'm a proud Latino, originally from Arequipa, Peru. I'm actually right now in Peru, presenting from here. I'm currently a principal threat research engineer at Splunk. Before Splunk, I used to run a blue team for a mid-sized financial services organization. Before that, I was a pen tester. So I wore different hats in the past 12 years. That's my Twitter account, and I always, share my work, share other people's work on my Twitter, and I'm pretty active there. So I always love connecting with new people. So follow me on Twitter if you wanna follow, the work I do and other people that I follow. My areas of focus and research for the past few years have been around adversary simulation, detection engineering, purple teaming. And in the past few years, I've done some talks at some conferences that you may have heard of. And if you're interested about these topics, I encourage you to visit my GitHub page, where I share all my work, all my talks, videos, slides, the tools. So you have it up there. Okay, so I want to start by talking about just saying that I'm really excited to be presenting at the Purple Team Summit for the first time. I'm really excited about this conference in general. It's a space that allows us to share ideas, learn from each other on this really interesting topic. I must confess that I'm a passionate advocate of purple teaming. In fact, if you read my Twitter bio, you're going to see that I introduce myself as a purple teamer. As I mentioned before Splunk, I used to run a blue team for financial services, focusing on detection and response. And purple teaming, the approach of purple teaming was probably one of the most important programs in my program. It helped us enhance our detection, our monitoring capabilities. We deployed a robust detection engineering program in a couple of years, thanks to this collaboration between offensive and defensive forces, right? At the beginning, we would only do purple team assessments. We would hire external consultants, like after a pen test or something like that. But then we realized that this is really important. It's helping us enhance our program. So we started doing our own purple team assessments internally. So I really think that as blue teams are evolving in their capabilities, in their operations, offensive engagements like pen testing are no longer our only requirements. I mean, we definitely need to do pen testing and those sort of services or engagements, but now blue teams, we have other types of needs, and purple teaming is the way to satisfy those needs, I think. So let's quickly define the concept of purple teaming in the context of this talk. And this is, I don't pretend for this to be the only definition, right? This is just my perspective. For me, purple teaming and adversary simulation, I actually use those terms, interchangeably. It's a coordinated exercise between a red team and a blue team with one common goal. And that goal is to identify gaps in visibility and detection capabilities, right? That's the main goal. Unlike other type of offensive exercises, purple teaming, I think, focuses on detection a lot and not prevention, right? It's really a collaborative exercise with, and really a knowledge transfer, if you want to call it that, because we both win, right? For us, the blue team, we learn about the techniques, we understand them, we start looking at the telemetry and create detections for them, so we get better. But red teams also get exposed to blue team's capabilities, and they understand what a blue team can do, what a blue team can see, and maybe they also enhance their red team capabilities by creating evasion paths or bypassing detections, so we both win, right, with purple teaming. So on this slide, I wanna share with you guys the process that we used to follow when we were doing our internal purple team engagements. This worked for us pretty good. It may work for you. You may use it as a starting point. So let's look at this diagram here. The first step is we're going to identify the technique of interest, right? This could come from a lot of different sources, right? Maybe it comes from the attack matter framework, right? Maybe it comes from a report from a threat actor, your favorite APT actor. You may want to, depending on your organization, on your threat model, on your vertical, you may have different threat actors targeting your organization. So you may want to look at the techniques that they use. This could come from a pen test report. Maybe the last pen test that someone executed against you, you may want to detect that technique. Or honestly, it could come from a tweet. A security researcher perhaps identifying a new way to move laterally, and you want to detect it. So that's a technique, right? The next step is to design the simulation scenario. And I think this is probably the most important step of the process, right? This is when we really start understanding the technique, researching the technique, classifying the technique, right? We start thinking about the scenario, right? Think about when you're about to simulate a technique, you could do it perhaps simulating the scenario of a rogue device in your network. Perhaps an attacker has obtained physical access to your network, broken in your office and connected to the network cable. That's one scenario. Another scenario, for example, is that someone has fallen for a phishing attack and now it's part of a botnet, right? Or it's infected. It's being controlled by a Trojan. So those are two completely different scenarios under the same technique. So we really need to start thinking about the scenario that we want to simulate, the scenario that we want to detect, and the expectations, right? So once we identify that, then we execute the technique. Oh, another important thing is that we identify the tool that we're going to use to simulate the attack, right? We're going to use a commercial tool, an open source tool. We're going to write our own tool. We have to really start thinking about this simulation scenario. So once we figure out that scenario, then we move on to execute the technique, okay? Now, in an ideal world, you have instrumented your environment so that this execution of this technique has generated telemetry, some kind of telemetry, right? For you to be able to build a detection, right? So this is when we ask ourselves, do we have centralized telemetry? Because if you don't have centralized telemetry from the execution of this technique, you're not going to be able to detect things at scale. I mean, sure, you could use that telemetry locally to maybe do incident response or investigations, but you're not going to be able to implement that in a detection, real-time monitoring, right? So you need that telemetry to be centralized in your SIM, in your analytics engine, whatever you may use, right? So if the answer is no, and you don't have that centralized telemetry, you need to start working on correcting that visibility gap, right? Now, this step right here, we could talk hours about this step because so many things you could uncover by executing this end-to-end test. The simplest form would be that you don't have the log for it and you need to enable that log. That's easy. But what if you do have the log enabled, but something's broken with your event pipeline? Maybe there's a firewall rule blocking those events flowing to your SIM. Maybe someone turned off something, right? Like, that's what I like about purple teaming, because it allows you to uncover issues with your detection program. But let's say we correct that visibility gap, we go back, execute the technique, and now we do have centralized telemetry. Great, we're making progress. Now the next question is, did we get a detection trigger? The first time you're executing this, you probably don't have a detection, but this is the great spot, because now you have a baseline of your regular endpoints, right? Your regular behavior. And now you have this telemetry, thanks to this purple team assessment of known bad, right? So then you go in and you go to your analytics engine, your SIM, and start figuring out how to build a correlation to detect that technique, right? So you build a detection, you go back, execute that technique again, and now you have a detection. Great, we made a lot of progress. Now, here's something really interesting. Like, what do you do now? Do you finish? Is it you're done, move on to the next technique? Or you go back and think about another simulation scenario? Well, I think that we really need to go back and think about another simulation scenario, because there's different ways of executing the same technique. And if you've thought about one, you can only detect that one. So what if an attacker comes in and executes that technique in a different way? We have to be really careful with this. We cannot treat the attack meta framework as a bingo card, like my friend Bryson says, right? We have to think about detection resilience. That's why I really think about simulation scenarios is so important for purple teaming, right? We need to simulate the same TP under different scenarios in different ways to confirm that detection resilience, right? And let's think about an example, simple example, curve roasting. Curve roasting, as you know, is a technique to elevate privileges in an Active Directory environment. There's different ways of executing it. I'm just gonna show you 3 ways of executing it, okay? The first 2, we're gonna use a tool like invoke curve roast or get users SPNs, right? And the way these 2 techniques work, or scenarios, is that they're gonna go in against your Active Directory, they're gonna list all the accounts that have a service principal name associated, and they're gonna get a service ticket for them and then try to crack it offline, right? But an attacker may be a little bit more sophisticated, and instead of going crazy and grabbing a service ticket for all your SPNs, they may do a little bit of recon first, identify one account that they think it's interesting, and just get a service ticket for that one account, right? So if you execute the simulation in these 2 first ways, and you think, yeah, I can detect curve roasting, well, you're wrong, right? So that's why I think it's really important to think about these simulation scenarios and to retest that technique in a different way. And actually this talk is all about this, okay? All right, now let's move on to why Active Directory? Like, what are you talking about Active Directory, Mauricio? Like, we're living in a cloud world, right? Like, it's cloudy out there right now. Well, yes, I mean, I think that we need to focus on cloud for sure. But let's not forget some stats, like 90% of the Fortune 1000 firms use Active Directory, right? This is a report from last year. Plus, in my experience, having worked with a lot of red teams and having seen real attackers, they use and have used Active Directory. And I think the most interesting example and confirmation from this is the recent ransomware cases, right? If you look at all these cases, Ryu, Conti, Revil, and all those others, they almost uniquely rely on Active Directory to deploy their ransomware through GPOs, through PSexSec, right? So it's out there, guys. Like, let's not forget about the foundational things. Sure, let's do cloud. Let's definitely focus on the new technologies, but let's not forget that this is happening. And I want to call out a really interesting project. You You probably all heard about this, the DFIR report. And if you look at the last 5 reports from these guys, almost every single ransomware attack is abusing Active Directory, all of them, right? So this is happening. So we need to enhance our visibility, our monitoring, our detection capabilities for Active Directory, and purple teaming is a great way of doing this, okay? And by the way, you know, I don't know any of these guys, but I do want to say thank you to the people under this project. It's amazing actionable intelligence that we can use to create purple teams, to create detection. So thanks everyone, and I encourage you to contribute to this project. Okay, now let's get closer to the simulations that we're gonna be running today. So what tool are we gonna use to simulate things? Well, we're gonna use PurpleSharp. This is a tool that I wrote, that I released at DerbyCon 2019. I released a new version at Black Hat last year, and I'm actually gonna be presenting at Black Hat 2021 as well this year, a new version of PurpleSharp, okay? So this is an open source adversary simulation tool that executes techniques under Windows Active Directory environments, following the attack MITRE framework. And the goal, when I wrote it, when I was a blue teamer, my goal was I need telemetry to build, test, and enhance detection controls. So that's the main goal, okay? That's the link for the tool. If you like it, go ahead. I have documentation, videos, demos. It's one simple C# binary or assembly. All you need is download one binary and you're ready to simulate around 50 MITRE techniques for AD, okay? Now, I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about the tool itself, but I just wanna mention how you can execute simulations with PurpleSharp. One way you can do this is with executing local simulations. For example, you know, you're gonna have access to an endpoint, you upload the PurpleSharp binary and you have interactive access to this computer endpoint, and you can simulate techniques interactively, right? So that's an easy way, right? Like that's how I wanted to start. But one key requirement for me was I needed a way to simulate techniques on remote endpoints that are outside my office, like, you know, maybe in another office, maybe in another country, maybe in another continent, right? I think that was for me really important because, you know, if I execute the same technique on the same network, sure, that's gonna detect because, you know, I'm spending all my time working on that network. But what if an attacker goes after that network in somewhere else, in your data center somewhere else, right? Like, that's why I wanted to build the capability to deploy remote simulations only by having network connectivity and by using Windows legitimate services like WMI, name pipes, SMB. So PurpleSharp will allow you to run a simulation, actually to deploy a simulation on a remote host. All you need is network connectivity and administrative credentials on that remote host, and that remote host is gonna run the simulation for you, okay? So I'm not gonna talk about this in the interest of time. You have the link for the PurpleSharp. You can go in and read how it works. So let's move on to the demos, guys. This is the cool part of the talk, okay? So we're gonna be running a couple of demos today. So let's talk about Active Directory discovery or reconnaissance. When an attacker lands on a network, the first thing that they need to do is figure out who they are on the network, right? Like figure out who is who are the admins, what computers are on this network, how many users do we have, et cetera, right? So this is the discovery phase, the tactic, right? So we're gonna execute this discovery tactic in 3 different playbooks. Almost the same techniques, but in different ways. And we're gonna learn about our environment when we do this. On the first scenario, we're gonna execute these 5 attack MITRE techniques. I'm not gonna talk about them. You can go in and go to the MITRE attack framework and do what they, learn what they do specifically. But the most important thing about this playbook will execute these techniques using the command line. So using Windows native tools. On the next scenario, we're gonna execute some similar techniques, but now this time we're gonna use PowerShell. That looks different on the logs, right? And on the third scenario, we're gonna execute a couple of techniques, but this time we're not gonna use the command line or PowerShell. We're gonna go straight against LDAP, okay? Okay, so I have my demo here, and hopefully this looks right on you guys, but I also have the link. This is on YouTube. You can look at this yourself. So let me first get HD going. So this looks a little bit better. Oops. Come on, help me out here. It's not working out with me, but okay, let's try this. Okay, well, this is not working out for me, but that's okay. Let me try this one more time. I just want to get HD, come on. Okay, I'm just gonna go on. Hopefully this looks good for you guys. If not, you know, you can, and actually I'm gonna go into the Slack channel and I'm gonna share with you guys the 2 links of the demo so you can look at it on a different screen, okay? You have them in case this is not looking right. That's okay. The demo gods are not happy with us. That's okay, we'll move on, okay? Yeah, okay. All right, so for this first demo, we have a domain joined computer and we have 3 playbooks, okay? So the first playbook, Purple Sharp actually supports JSON files as playbooks, okay? So in this first one, we're gonna execute 5 techniques, as I mentioned before. We have a sleep time of 3 seconds between each technique. I'm not gonna discuss the specifics of the techniques. You know, you can look at them later on when you look at this video. So I'm just gonna fast forward this and I'm gonna run these techniques just by using Purple Sharp /pb and pass a JSON file. And it starts running. It's gonna run the technique, wait 3 seconds, run the next technique, wait 3 seconds, and you get the idea. So I'm just gonna fast forward once again in the interest of time. Once Purple Sharp finishes, it's gonna give you this JSON file with all the results. So you can look at these in a text editor, you can import this to your SIM, you can parse this programmatically, and you see all the results of the technique executed. In this case, you know, this is the net view technique to identify remote hosts. In this case, identify 4 hosts. You see like the process ID, the time, you get all the information you need from this technique. So you can go in your logs and look for it, right? So I'm gonna fast forward again and let's go to your Splunk environment and let's see what type of telemetry this generates. Of course, you need command line logging, you need process logging, right? So something like an EDR, maybe event 4688. In this case, I'm using Sysmon. With Sysmon, I'm able to see these commands. So you can use Sysmon or your EDR or whatever telemetry you have to create detections for these commands that are, you know, something like net domain, net group domain users, for example. Like if someone wants to know who, domain admins. If someone wants to know who your domain admins are, you should know, like you should get an alert. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So now let's do the same with PowerShell. And with Purple Sharp, all you have to do is set up another field right here called variation. So you just say variation number 2, and that's gonna instruct Purple Sharp to execute this technique, but now using PowerShell. So a different way of executing the same technique, right? So pretty simple. Purple Sharp allows you to execute this technique in many different ways. Now, something even more cool to be more custom in this technique domain group discovery, I can actually define which groups I want to enumerate within the JSON playbook, and Purple Sharp will enumerate those specific groups for you using PowerShell, using the command line, whatever you do. So we execute this, once again, wait 3 seconds, and Purple Sharp starts doing its job. I'm gonna fast forward, we're on 21 minutes, so I'm gonna pick up the pace a little bit. Now you see the results. Now, of course, once again, that JSON results, you get all the information that you need. You know, you can see all the PowerShell commandlets that were used. Now let's move on to your logs. Like if you have EDR or Sysmon or something like this, all you will see something like this, PowerShell.exe encoded, right? But if you have script log logging for PowerShell, now you have more visibility and start like, hey, who's executing get local user or get AD user or get AD group, right? So we're learning something new about executing the same technique in a different way, right? Finally, let's do a little bit more complicated. And now let's execute these 2 techniques of domain enumeration, but now variation number 3. And variation number 3 for Purple Sharp means do not use the command line, do not use PowerShell, go straight against LDAP using C# namespaces for LDAP. So we execute this, And I'm just gonna fast forward here. You can look at this, on your own time. Purple Sharp enumerates users, enumerates groups. If we look at our telemetry now, we see that we don't see anything on command line login. All we see is Purple Sharp running. So how can we detect this? Well, one way could be using Sysmon event type 3, which is network connection, and try to look for who's connecting to your domain controller on the LDAP port 389. So this could be one way of detecting it, right? I'm not saying it's the only one, but at least we have this visibility with Sysmon. So we executed three different techniques, guys. Sorry, several techniques in three different ways. What are the detection takeaways? Well, for the first one, we need command line login. So you want to use 4688 plus command line. You want to use Sysmon. You want to use your favorite EDR. We need to identify the common enumeration techniques, create detections for them. We should also deploy capabilities to the code base64 encoded commands so your analysts get to see what's going on. For the second playbook, PowerShell visibility. Like if you have something like script log login, you'll be able to see this. You have two other types of logins as well. PowerShell login, I haven't looked at them on this lab. You may want to look at them. And for the third one, network visibility, like maybe something like SIG, or maybe like your network threat analysis or threat analytics vendor to detect that, right? So same tactic, three different playbooks, three different ways of detecting, guys. We've learned a lot today. My question to you is, how many of these can you detect? 1, 2, 3, none? Well, you can use Purple Sharp and quickly do this with zero cost at your network yourself, right? So let's move on to the next demo. How are we on time? Okay, 5 minutes, good. Password spraying, okay? Let's, you know this technique. I've seen it used by red teams and purple and pen testers a lot. And APT actors also use it. You can look at this CISA report and you'll see that APT29 uses password spray. Okay, now let's jump to the scenarios, okay? So I'm gonna execute this technique in three different ways. The first scenario. The scenario is that an attacker has obtained physical access to your network, maybe through like a physical break-in, and is gonna execute a password spray attack against one host using the SMB protocol. On the second scenario, a domain joint device has been compromised and is being controlled by Trojan, and the adversary is using that to execute a password spraying attack using Kerberos. And on the third scenario, same as before, domain joint device compromised, but now an attacker is gonna use the NTLM protocol to execute the password spraying attack. One technique, three different ways of detecting it, right? So let's look at them. Let's jump to the demo, guys. Once again, I've shared the video with you. If this does not look right, just go open that on the Slack channel and you'll be able to see it on full HD, okay? All right, so let's move on. In this case, I'm gonna run these simulations or Pulper Sharp from a non-domain joint device, right? Like think about like an operator computer, okay? Okay, so for this demo, I'm gonna execute the first remote password spray simulation. This is the password that we're gonna use. We're gonna execute it using these 5 users, so you can define which users you're gonna spray. We're gonna define the host that we're gonna run this against, Windows 2016-2. So Purple Sharp is going to use this JSON playbook to execute that password spraying attack against that remote host. And of course, I have my Splunk login here to detect this technique. So we're gonna move on, execute the technique. Password spraying, Purple Sharp does this for you. We go into the logs and we looked at event 4625, which is failed logon type 3, which is network type logon. And now we can detect this technique. Look at this. We have this IP, password spraying against this other host, and these are the 5 users that it used. Cool. So we learned one way of detecting this. But let's now do something more interesting. On this other playbook, I'm not gonna run the technique locally, I'm gonna run the technique remotely. So I'm actually going to deploy that simulation on 2 different hosts. The first one is against host Windows 10-2, and the third one is against Windows 10-3. So what we're gonna do is execute password spraying attack from a domain joint device that is somewhere in my network. This could be next to you, or this could be in a different country, as long as you have network connectivity, right? Because I wanna know if that technique is being detected, if I execute it here, or if I execute it somewhere else, right? Now, another interesting thing about these other ways is that Purple Sharp, as you can see here, I'm not defining which users it's going to spray. Purple Sharp is just going to do an LDAP query and randomly pick 15 users based on this, right? So it's really flexible. And the only difference between the first and the second is that on the second, you see this extra field that I have here called protocol. So on the second one, I'm going to execute that technique using NTLM. Because why? Because that looks different on the logs, and that's to use different ways of detecting it, right? So we're going to move on. Let's see how we're in time. Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay, let's fast forward here. So Purple Sharp will execute these two techniques. You need to set up a username and password so it can deploy those remote simulations on those remote hosts. It's going to do its job. I'm going to fast forward, get the results. We see the results, and now, as you can see, on the first result against the simulation run on Windows 10-2, it actually ran under the context of a user that's logged in on that host right now. So it's pretty cool because it's a credible simulation. And you can see that it did a password spray attack against these 15 randomly picked users. Purple Sharp does that for you, and using Kerberos. So how can we detect this? Does anyone know? We don't have enough time to read your answers, but event 4771. If you're logging Kerberos events, you'll be able to detect this with event 4771, okay? So yeah, I'm just gonna fast forward here because of time. And on the second technique, you're using NTLM. That looks different on the logs, right? For NTLM, you're gonna use event 4776, as you can see here, to detect this password spray attack from this other host, Windows 10-3, right? So once again, one technique, 3 different ways of executing it, 3 different ways of learning about our environment, learning about telemetry. We've learned about these event IDs. We also learned that if we want to have full visibility, we need domain control logs, but we also need domain member endpoints. Otherwise, you only have half of the picture. Now, if you're interested about detecting password spraying, the Splunk threat research team, we let's call it our product, is the Enterprise Security Content Update, which is a Splunk app that we work on, and we release detections, right? It's open source. It's a free application that you can download. And if you have Splunk, you can apply this, install this application, and you're gonna get a few hundred detections ready to be used, okay? So as part of my first batch of detections, actually, I worked on developing Active Directory password spraying detections. And this was just released a couple of weeks ago. I have 8 detections that will detect password spraying in many different ways. Now, you don't need to be a Splunk user to leverage this. Because our content is open source, you can look at the query and you can translate that query to whatever SIM you use, right? So it's not only for Splunk users, right? Now, another interesting thing is that I'm working on creating these same detections for Sigma, so I should be able to release those Sigma detections soon. And here are the links where you can look at our app from the team. Okay, and this is when, just wrapping up here, guys, where I'm gonna release the new project I was talking about. This is called the Active Directory Purple Team Playbook, right? It's in a beta version right now. It's pretty light right now, bear with me, right? I want this to be a library of ready-to-use playbooks designed to be used with Purple Sharp, right? So it's gonna allow blue teams, it's gonna allow you guys to run Purple Team exercises against Active Directory at 0 cost. All you need to do is go to the Purple Sharp project, download the binary, go to the Purple AD project, download a JSON file, and you're ready to execute internal Purple Team exercises against Active Directory, right? Like, that's it, that's all you need. So right now, if you go to this GitHub page, I think I only have 4 or 5. I intend to grow it. I do want to work with the community. Hopefully, if you have ideas, let me know because I want to hear them. But I just want to help everyone be able to run their own Purple Team exercises, okay? And that's it for me, guys. Thanks a lot. I leave you with my Twitter account, with the Purple Sharp project and Purple AD. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'm glad that I was able to make it in 32 minutes. So Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Jorge.
No, thank you. And thank you for releasing new stuff. I'm trying to keep track of all the new stuff getting released and posting on the Summit discussion, as well as on your hallway channel. Just a real quick question before we jump over to the next speakers is this JSON based on any particular standard other than JSON, obviously, or is it only ingestible currently by your Purple Sharp tool?
Yeah, that's a good question. And right now it's only ingestible by Purple Sharp. Purple Sharp does allow you to export a JSON navigator, attack navigator file, and convert it to a JSON, to a Purple Sharp JSON. But yeah, right now it's pretty arbitrary. It's only for Purple Sharp. So if you have ideas, or anyone other has ideas about how to make this more consumable or more, let's call it, universal, let me know. I'm all ears. This is just the first version.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something as an industry we need to get better at. We have the adversary emulation plans from MITRE are in YAML. The Atomic Red Team stuff is in YAML, but not consumable by anything else, right? You have your JSON here, and at Scythe we also have JSON, but it's a little different than yours because it's all procedure level. So when you take something from, say, a technique, like how do you know what procedure to use? A lot of people are like, oh, can I import from here or there? But awesome, yeah. I am going to let you go. Thank you again for the talk, for releasing the tool. You have lots of questions and feedback on your hallway channel. And again, thank you for everything you do. I do know you were presenting from Peru. If you would have told me of your Wi-Fi issues earlier, I would have been a lot more nervous. So glad that didn't.
It all worked out. It all worked out. Thanks, Jorge.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.